All right, welcome back. Now we are going to focus on the second G, which is give. Okay. And what we're giving is we are giving our listeners an emotional experience by telling a story or a series of stories around the struggle that ultimately leads you to overcoming the challenge. This is so very important because we've talked about how important storytelling is, how that creates connection immediately with your audience. Everybody loves a good story. That's why we read. That's why we go to the movies. That's why we watch television shows. That's why we talk to each other on the phone. We enjoy stories. And your audience is no different. And so go back and think about, or go back to your notes and look at from the last module where you wrote out your backstory and how you overcame and how that relates to the product or service that you plan to offer your audience, the ideal client who's sitting in your audience. It is so important to think more in terms of telling the content within the story rather than building the content out from the story. I want to help that make sense because it may not be clear. And the best way I can do that is by showing you in real time how I do it. So when I'm sharing with people about my Speakers Academy, my Speakers Mastermind, I tell this story. Are you ready? Here we go. So back in 2013, I hosted my first live event, and I was so incredibly excited. It was the first time that I had had the opportunity to host something live, and I had just come off of this terrible failure that was very public, where we lost everything. Lost the house, lost the cars, were on food stamps. It was a very rough time. And in spite of that, I still started this coaching and speaking business. And so I got some small wins, got some programs where I had clients and I was, doing pretty good. And so by this time I'm saying, okay, my people are asking for a live event. I want to host a live event. Let's do it. And so I hosted a live event in Atlanta, and there were a good amount of people there. I spoke 3 times during that event, and each time I got incredibly great feedback, a lot of engagement from the audience. That third time, I was ready to make my pitch. I did my talk. I wowed them, right? I had people clapping, and I could hear them saying, "Oh," like people like tweeting, and it was like all this engagement. And then came my pitch. And I gave my pitch, and I offered my program, and I went over to my sales table. And I'm like, okay, yes, I'm so excited. I'm ready. I had all my stuff together. I had my e-commerce put up. I was ready to enroll people and get information and do all this stuff. And I sat at my table, and there were crickets. Nobody came over to my table. It was empty. Nobody even came over for an ussy with me. I sat there by myself. I could hear conversations all around me. The other speakers whom I had invited had people at their tables. There was no one at mine. And I was so thoroughly embarrassed. And it took me all the way back to that very public, humiliating failure from the very first business endeavor. And I was so sad and so frustrated and so embarrassed that at one point I finally just picked up my phone and I pretended as if I was doing something very important on it, because I didn't want to see the people whose eyes were looking at me like, poor thing. The other coaches who were there who were like, man, poor Ebony L. Nobody's at her table. And in that moment, I wanted to quit. I really did. I wanted to walk away and just say, hey, this entrepreneurship thing must not be for me. Cannot seem to make it work. But I had a moment where I said, wait, this is not my first time speaking. This is not my first time sharing from the stage. There's got to be something that I missed. And so I disappeared from the marketplace for about 2-3 months. Didn't make any offers, didn't do too much, didn't send emails. I retreated and I became very self-assessing. And I thought about all the talks that I had given up until that point and what were the differences between the two talks, between the two calls to action. I thought this whole thing through. And I came to this revelation. It's one thing to move the crowd, but it's a whole other animal to move the crowd to action, and to the action that you have decided that they need to take. And with that revelation, I went back to the drawing board and I started revamping my everything. And I created a speaking system, a formula, if you will, that I now run all my talks through. And so at that time, Periscope was really big. It was like just getting out there, and it was just all the rage at that time. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to run my new formula, my new system through Periscope. And so in January of 2016, I decided to go live on Periscope for 30 days straight. And I did it. And every time I would run my 15-20-minute talk through my newly devised formula. And about midway through the month, on into the end of the month, I started making my offer. And it was for my newest program that was $2,000. And you know what? This time it worked. I filled my program in only 2 months. And that program was the highest investment of any of my other previous offers. And that's all because I went back to the drawing board and developed a system. And it's a system that I am going to teach you today. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay, so you want to build the content out of the story, not the other way around. That backstory was important to the offer that I was going to make later on for my Speakers Academy. I didn't spend a whole lot of time in the failure story, because the failure story is not necessarily germane to the Speakers Academy. But me failing at speaking and what I learned from that and how I turned that around, that is important to my offer. Did you see that? All right. So now it's your turn. I want you to use the backstory, your backstory that you wrote out in the previous module. And now I want you to build it out to lead into your offer, where we galvanize in the next video. Okay, so Now, where I stopped was not where you're going to stop. I just wanted to give you the story part, okay? But you still got to give them great content. So I want you to start building it out. I want you to include your points. You want to have at least 3, okay? 3 points that you build out through your talk, okay? And then we're going to talk about your call to action or how to galvanize in the next video. See you in a minute.